Ron Howard may have been the beloved red-headed boy of the Andy Griffith Show, but behind Mayberry's charm was a secret he carried for decades. The truth: there was one person on that set he utterly despised. To the audience, their bond looked warm and loving, the kind of family television was built on. But for young Ron, it was a different story entirely. Cold stares, icy exchanges, and a tension he never forgot. This is the castmate who shattered the illusion of Mayberry. The Andy Griffith Show might be remembered as one of television's most wholesome classics, but the world behind the cameras was far more complicated than anyone watching at home ever realized. When the Andy Griffith Show premiered in 1960, it quickly became one of the most beloved programs on television. For 8 seasons, viewers tuned in to Mayberry, a town that seemed frozen in time, slow, peaceful, and full of gentle lessons about family and friendship. Sheriff Andy Taylor, his son Opie, Aunt Bee, and the bumbling deputy Barney Fife were more than characters. They were icons of American television. Families across the country felt like they were watching their own neighbors each week. But behind the scenes, Mayberry wasn't always the paradise it appeared to be. The cast didn't live in the same harmony that their characters projected on screen. Egos clashed, personalities rubbed the wrong way, and quiet feuds lingered long after the cameras stopped rolling. Even Andy Griffith himself wasn't immune. His relationship with one of his co-stars turned icy, so tense that it would take decades for forgiveness to finally come. For young Ron Howard, who played Opie, the cheerful illusion of Mayberry was even more complicated. To the world, he was the lucky boy who got to grow up surrounded by Hollywood legends. But for him, the experience also meant navigating an environment where not every family member welcomed him with warmth, and one castmate in particular left a mark he would never forget. Because while Mayberry may have looked like a perfect slice of Americana, the reality behind those white picket fences was far messier and far more revealing. But how did Ron, a child star at the center of it all, experience the truth behind Mayberry's curtain? That story starts with his own childhood journey. Ron Howard didn't stumble into fame by accident. From the very beginning, his life was steeped in show business. Born on March 1, 1954, in Duncan, Oklahoma, Ron was the son of Rance and June Howard, both actors who knew the struggles of the industry. For little Ron, Hollywood wasn't a dream he grew into. It was the family business. By the age of 5, he was already a working actor, appearing in shows like The Twilight Zone and Dennis the Menace. Then came the role that changed everything: Opie Taylor. When the Andy Griffith Show began in 1960, Ron was cast as Andy's wide-eyed son, the heart of Mayberry's innocence. The chemistry between Griffith and young Howard looked effortless, and in many ways it was. Griffith often acted as a mentor, guiding the boy through the pressures of early fame. Fans adored Opie, and Ron quickly became one of television's most recognizable faces. But child stardom came with its own complications. While his classmates were learning multiplication tables, Ron was memorizing scripts. His school often happened on studio lots, where tutors tried to balance his education with filming schedules. To audiences, he was the picture of confidence, but Ron has admitted he often felt like he was simply doing his job, smiling, hitting his marks, and trying to please everyone around him. And then there were the difficult moments. One story Ron has recalled is the infamous pickle episode, where Opie is forced to eat jar after jar of Aunt Bee's terrible pickles. What the audience didn't know was that Ron hated pickles in real life. Take after take, he had to chew and swallow them, a quiet misery for a little boy trying to look cheerful in front of the camera. And working opposite the stern Frances Bavier, Aunt Bee herself only heightened the discomfort. She was never warm toward him, never the loving figure that viewers imagined. For Ron, those early experiences left an impression that went far beyond child acting. He was learning, even as a boy, that television families didn't always match reality. And in his case, the distance between what America saw and what he lived was enormous. But Ron's story didn't end with Mayberry. While most child actors faded into obscurity, he was about to reinvent himself in a way no one expected. When the Andy Griffith Show ended, many assumed Ron Howard's career would fade along with it. Child stars rarely make the leap into adult success, and the industry can be unforgiving once the cuteness wears off. But Ron was different. In 1974, he found himself at the center of another cultural phenomenon: Happy Days. As Richie Cunningham, the wholesome, clean-cut teenager from Milwaukee, Ron once again became the face of America's living room. His easygoing charm made Richie the perfect counterbalance to Henry Winkler's leather-jacketed rebel, Fonzie. Their chemistry wasn't just good acting, it was real. Off-camera, Ron and Winkler built a friendship that carried over into the show, giving their characters an authenticity fans loved. Happy Days quickly became one of the most popular shows of its era, and once again, Ron Howard was part of television history. But even while basking in that success, Ron's mind was elsewhere. Unlike many of his peers, he didn't just want to perform, he wanted to create. Behind the cameras, he studied scripts, watched directors work, and imagined what he would do differently. By the late 1970s, he was ready to take a risk that could have ended his career or defined it forever. That chance came through a deal with producer Roger Corman, the king of low-budget filmmaking. The bargain was simple. Ron would star in a film called Eat My Dust. If Corman allowed him to direct his own project, that gamble became Grand Theft Auto, a wild, chaotic action comedy co-written with his father, Rance Howard. It wasn't perfect, but it proved something crucial. Ron Howard could handle himself behind the camera. The shift had begun. While audiences still saw him as Richie Cunningham, Ron knew acting was only one chapter of his story. Directing was where his future lay. And once he committed to it, there would be no turning back. But Ron's rise as a director wasn't just a smooth climb. It was a mix of triumphs, stumbles, and the kind of criticism that could crush anyone unprepared. Ron Howard's directorial debut with Grand Theft Auto might have been a scrappy, low-budget experiment, but it marked the start of something bigger. Hollywood had seen countless child stars fade away, yet Ron was proving he could reinvent himself and, more importantly, he could tell stories that connected with audiences. Through the late 1970s and early 1980s, Ron sharpened his craft by directing television movies, learning the discipline of storytelling on tight budgets and even tighter schedules. But his first real breakthrough came in 1982 with Night Shift, a wild comedy starring Michael Keaton, Shelley Long, and Henry Winkler. The film was bold, quirky, and full of energy, evidence that Ron wasn't afraid to take risks behind the camera. Just 2 years later, he delivered a film that solidified his reputation, Splash. The romantic fantasy about a man falling in love with a mermaid, starring Tom Hanks and Daryl Hannah, became a box office hit. It had heart, humor, and broad appeal, exactly the kind of film Hollywood studios wanted. Suddenly, Ron Howard wasn't just an actor turned director, he was a proven filmmaker who could deliver both commercially and creatively. From there, his projects only grew larger. Cocoon in 1985 showed his ability to handle ensemble casts and heartfelt stories. Willow in 1988 proved he could direct sprawling fantasy adventures. By the time the 1990s rolled around, Ron Howard had earned something rare in Hollywood: trust. Studios knew he could balance spectacle with story, humor with heart. But his defining moment came with Apollo 13 in 1995. The film dramatized NASA's near-disastrous space mission, blending technical precision with deeply human storytelling. Starring Tom Hanks, Kevin Bacon, and Ed Harris, the movie became a critical and commercial triumph. Its line, "Houston, we have a problem," echoed around the world, cementing Howard as one of Hollywood's most reliable and respected directors. That success paved the way for his greatest achievement, just a few years later, A Beautiful Mind, a film that would earn him Hollywood's highest honor. But with awards and acclaim came something Ron Howard wasn't fully prepared for: controversy. For all of Ron Howard's triumphs, success in Hollywood never comes without its shadows. After the soaring acclaim of Apollo 13, he delivered what many considered his crowning achievement, A Beautiful Mind. The film told the story of John Nash, a brilliant mathematician battling schizophrenia, and it struck audiences as both powerful and deeply moving. Starring Russell Crowe, Jennifer Connelly, and Ed Harris, the movie dominated awards season. Howard walked away with the Academy Award for Best Director, and the film claimed Best Picture, Best Supporting Actress, and Best Adapted Screenplay. But almost immediately, critics began pointing to the details left out of Nash's life: his affairs, his troubled personal choices, even the existence of a child he fathered outside of marriage. All of it was missing from the film. Some accused Howard of deliberately sanitizing the story to make Nash more sympathetic. The controversy raised a difficult question: was he protecting the integrity of the story, or was he softening the truth for Hollywood? Howard later admitted the omissions were intentional. His goal wasn't to document every flaw of John Nash's life, but to highlight the heart of the story: genius, struggle, and redemption. Still, the backlash stung. It reminded him of an uncomfortable truth: no matter how carefully a story is told, someone will always accuse the storyteller of getting it wrong. This wouldn't be the last time Ron Howard found himself in the crosshairs of public criticism. Years later, his film adaptation of J.D. Vance's memoir, Hillbilly Elegy, also sparked controversy, not for what it included, but for what its subject would later become. At the time Howard directed the Netflix adaptation, Vance was just a writer, sharing his personal history. But as Vance's political career took off, and his rhetoric shifted dramatically, Howard found himself once again linked to a story that carried unintended weight. For a man known as Hollywood's steady hand, these moments were deeply personal. They were reminders that even the most trusted storyteller can't control how the world reacts to the stories he chooses to tell. But while critics took their shots, Ron's deepest frustrations weren't always with journalists or moviegoers. Some of the most painful tensions came from the people closest to him, co-stars and collaborators who turned harmony into bitterness. For most of his career, Ron Howard built a reputation as Hollywood's calmest storm, steady, professional, never one to chase drama. But that doesn't mean his path was free of it. In fact, one of his earliest lessons about conflict came when he was still just a boy on the set of The Andy Griffith Show. To millions of viewers, Aunt Bee, played by Frances Bavier, was the heart of Mayberry, the sweet, caring matriarch who fussed over Opie as if he were her own grandson. But to Ron, the woman behind the role was someone entirely different. He remembered her not with warmth, but with distance. She was stern, icy, and rarely treated him with the affection audiences imagined. For a child trying to navigate fame and growing up at the same time, her coldness left a lasting mark. One memory stands out: the infamous pickle episode, where Opie is forced to eat jar after jar of Aunt Bee's awful homemade pickles. Audiences laughed, never knowing that Ron despised pickles in real life. Take after take he had to chew and swallow, all while facing Bavier's rigid, joyless presence. To him, it wasn't just a scene, it was misery. And as he grew older, he never pretended otherwise. Asked about her years later, Howard admitted she was simply impossible to connect with. He didn't hate many people in his life, but he utterly despised the way she made him feel small. That early experience would echo decades later. When Ron adapted J.D. Vance's memoir, Hillbilly Elegy, he thought he was championing a story of resilience. But as Vance's political career surged and his words shifted sharply, Ron once again felt blindsided by someone he thought he understood. For him, it wasn't about politics, it was about trust. Just like in Mayberry, the smile on the surface didn't match the reality behind it. What these moments taught Ron was simple: appearances can deceive. A co-star who looks like family on screen can be cold as ice off camera. A writer whose words once inspired can become unrecognizable with time. And even for a man as measured as Ron Howard, those disappointments cut deep. Yet while feuds and frustrations shadowed parts of his career, there was one area of Ron's life that never wavered: the love story that grounded him through it all. In an industry known for whirlwind romances and messy breakups, Ron Howard's personal life stands out as almost unbelievable. While scandals swirled around many of his peers, Ron quietly built one of the most enduring marriages Hollywood has ever seen. It all began in high school. Ron was just 16 when he met Cheryl Alley, the girl who would change his life. Their first date wasn't red carpets or Hollywood glamour. It was a simple night in a mint green Volkswagen Beetle, a trip to the movies and pizza afterwards. Ron later joked that the car still runs, and so does their marriage. But at the time, Cheryl didn't say yes right away. Ron had to propose 3 separate times before she agreed, not because she doubted his love, but because she wanted to make sure she was ready for a life that would be anything but ordinary. In June of 1975, they finally married, with family, friends, and even a few Happy Days co-stars watching. Over the decades that followed, they raised 4 children together, including Bryce Dallas Howard, who would go on to become a respected actress and director in her own right. Despite Ron's fame and demanding career, Cheryl remained the center of the Howard family, the grounding force who kept everything steady. Their children often describe her as the sun, moon, and stars of the household. Even after 5 decades, Ron speaks of Cheryl with the same admiration he had as a teenager. For their 50th anniversary, he didn't celebrate with a Hollywood spectacle. Instead, he took her for a drive in that very same mint green VW Bug, letting the road and the memories remind them of where it all began. In a town where love is often fleeting, Ron and Cheryl proved something rare: that true partnership can last through fame, fortune, and everything in between. While others in Hollywood burned out or fell apart, they just kept paddling forward, side by side. But Ron Howard's story isn't just about love and stability. It's also about legacy. From Mayberry to the Oscars, his journey left a mark on television, film, and the millions of viewers who grew up with him. Ron Howard's life has been anything but simple. From his earliest days in Mayberry, where he quietly despised a co-star the world believed was like family, to the controversies that followed his most celebrated films, his story has always been shaped by contrasts. On screen, he was the smiling boy next door. Behind the camera, he became one of Hollywood's most trusted storytellers. And at home, he built the kind of love and family few in his industry ever achieve. What makes Ron's journey remarkable isn't just the awards or the box office hits. It's how he navigated the gap between appearances and reality. He learned early that smiles can hide tension, that trust can turn into disappointment, and that the people who seem closest can sometimes be the ones who hurt you most. Yet through it all, he created stories that moved millions and built a legacy defined by resilience, craft, and heart. From child star to Oscar-winning director, from hidden feuds to a 50-year marriage, Ron Howard's life reminds us that what we see on screen is never the full story. And maybe that's why his work endures, because he's lived the very lesson he so often puts into his films. Behind every perfect image, there's a complicated truth waiting to be revealed. So now we want to hear from you. Which Ron Howard movie left the biggest impression on you? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more untold Hollywood stories.